You're listening to Mind Over Me, the mental wellness podcast with me, Scott Carter. I am a licensed therapist. Here at Mind Over Me, I offer an unconventional approach to therapy and mental health in general. The therapy system is misguided and broken. So many people are turning to mental health professionals for help, and they're just not finding it. It's my goal to bring some unconventional means, unconventional views, and maybe some unconventional techniques to helping people find mental wellness. Instead of being dependent on a system or a medication or a professional for mental wellness or mental stability, my goal is to always empower and help people by teaching them how to help themselves. This podcast is about self-efficacy, self-determination, and self-empowerment. Every person needs to find a better connection with themselves. Whether you realize it or not, you are the answer to your problems. You just need better information, and I hope to give it to you. So, thank you for being here. Let's dive in. And we are back. Welcome to the next installment. This is Mind Over Me, of course. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Today's topic has to do mostly about identity, right? This is one of those topics that on the surface I think seems really boring and mundane to people, and yet it's so important. And part of my challenge is to maybe break it down in chunks to make this topic more interesting and maybe more important to people because of just how incredibly important it is. And so in this episode, I'm going to specifically talk about a way that we work against ourselves. I'm going to talk about a way that we kind of harm our sense of self, our identity, and that is self-betrayal. Very, very common thing these days. At least that's what I've learned. I've come to find that through building my own life, my own mental health, my own identity, self-betrayal is just an extremely important topic because so many of us are doing it day in and day out, and we may not realize that we're doing it. I'm going to talk about how you can tell that you are betraying yourself or that you're in a state of self-betrayal, learning to listen to yourself, learning to trust yourself in that capacity is so important, so super important to kind of stop and pay attention to what is going on with your body, your mind, your emotions, your psyche, whatever, because it's going to give you very, very important messages. A lot of times, those messages can be quite uncomfortable, and yet it's the uncomfortable messages that we usually need to pay the most attention to. But we're going to get into that. That is the topic of today's show. We're going to break down introduce a couple other segments here, kind of trying to keep up with the times, trying to address some of the hot topics that are currently going on. And there is a post that has gone quite viral on X. It is a little bit of a kerfuffle. I'm not exactly sure what that word means. I just really like it. But it is raising quite a bit of hubbub. It was a post, presumably by a therapist, anonymously too, posted anonymously. Looks like it was probably on Facebook, on some kind of Facebook post. And again, it's just getting shared around like crazy. And a lot of seasoned clinicians are like, they're quite upset. They're quite upset. This person is getting absolutely destroyed online, by professionals. Without further ado, this is what this person says, because this is important. I'm trying to raise awareness for the public here. This is what it says. Good morning. I'm trying to be professional, but I'm also human, and I'm struggling. I have a client that is opposite than me politically, and I'm having a hard time giving her advice without animosity coming up for me. How could I fire her to protect my mental health, or do I bring it up to her that my beliefs don't align with hers? Thank you for any help. The comment section is fun and enjoyable. I'll be honest, it's actually a little bit of a breath of fresh air. I'm glad to see more therapists, more clinicians, more psychologists finally speaking up about all of the ethical concerns happening in the therapy world right now. All the people who have become therapists who probably should not be therapists. One psychologist said, "Let me get this straight. ... Some of y'all can't be in the room with a client who votes different. Not gonna make it." So let me break this down a little bit where the problems are happening. Starting from the beginning, okay? One of the first egregious things that this therapist says is, I'm having a hard time giving her advice. Now, to be clear, a therapist is not supposed to give you life advice, okay? It's not a therapist's job to say, this decision, make this decision or make that decision, break up, stay with them, buy, sell, whatever, okay? That's not a therapist's job. What I try to do is sort of just present people with their choices. Where if they say, like they may tell me, I want this goal, right? I want to accomplish this in therapy. And so I might try to point out things that are in their way. And I may give them some insight on like, well, if that's your goal, probably the best way to accomplish that goal is to take this route or make, right, this set of decisions in your life. But I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm always very clear. Everything that I say, everything out of my mouth is merely a suggestion. But I do my best to try and point out to people like, well, it seems like you've got a couple of obstacles. And in order to accomplish those goals, we ought to have a discussion about those obstacles and why those are obstacles for you. And here are some potential ways around those obstacles. But at the end of the day, everybody should be allowed to make all of their own decisions. But that's one of the first egregious things that she said. But of course, the elephant in the room is this therapist wants to fire. I'm assuming this therapist is a she, because most therapists are women, and frankly, most of the time, I find that female therapists are a lot more biased, and there's been a lot more acceptable bias in this field, and we're too busy protecting and rescuing the reputations of women than we are doing the right thing. I'm just being honest. I know that's going to be wildly unpopular for some people. I'm just calling it how I see it. But anyways, the elephant in the room is that she wants to fire this client because the client has different political views. Now, this is loaded. This is extremely loaded. When I was in grad school, there was a strong emphasis on ethics, ethical practices, and the like, and how it was absolutely required for therapists to check their values at the door, to leave their biases at the door. It was widely understood that people would walk into your office and sit on your couch that, like, as a human being, you would have lots of issues with that person, and your job was to set those values aside and take the role as a professional. If a therapist is unable to do that, they have no business being a therapist. The huge egregious thing here is to fire her to protect my mental health because of that client's voting choices, because of that client's political perspectives. Therapists are not supposed to be just in the habit of firing clients just to protect their own mental health. I realize that sometimes those situations will arise that can emotionally compromise the therapist. If a therapist cannot hear political views that are not aligned with theirs, that's just a big problem. That's just a major problem. Like, if you're a therapist and you expect everybody's political views to align with yours, you're gonna have a rough go. It's wild to me that when people are getting into this field, that they're thinking to themselves, "Oh yeah, everybody that comes through my door is gonna be wonderful and great and see the world the way that I do." Like, therapy is about working through tough issues, and it's unfortunate there are so many. And by the way, I have found that this is actually really common. You don't have to spend much time on the therapist subreddit at all to see a lot of these problems and issues in the therapy world. So I was engaged in some discussion with some of these professionals and having a discussion about, like, well, what do we do to address this problem? Do schools need to have a better screening process? My answer was, well, I don't think schools are going to do that. Schools have turned into a for-profit industry. They're going to let anybody in there that's going to hand over a check for the tuition. It doesn't matter how ill-prepared or unstable that person might be. That's just how it is now. So my answer was, I feel like it's going to be easier and better to try and educate the public. Be very discriminating about choosing your therapist. Interview them, ask them questions, screen them, and don't be afraid to move on if you can tell it's not a good fit. Don't force it to work if it's not working. But also, if your therapist says to you, I don't like who you voted for, I don't like your political beliefs, I can't continue this relationship because of it. Like, that's not a sufficient reason. So what you ought to do is file an ethics complaint against that therapist. We just have to take these actions. I think there are some situations too, and this is not necessarily a topic for this show, this particular episode, but there are situations where you may want to consider a malpractice litigation against therapists. There's so many unethical practices. There are so many biases, and so many of them have just become so acceptable and so normal. And unfortunately, I hate to say it, the only thing that will help correct any of these problems or improve them is to have these people punished. And I'm not big on punishments either. I'm not really big on being punitive, but I really think that's going to be the only thing that works. The moral of the story, folks, just be careful. Be choosy about your therapist. Screen them first. I mean, if you can. I realize that some people, their insurance will just shove them into a clinic and they just have to kind of get who they get. But, do your best. Do your best to pick a good one. So, moving on. If you're new here, I usually include a segment of shadow work journal prompts. And I usually do it before the last segment for the topic. But I want the shadow work journal prompts to really reflect this topic. So I may switch it around. I may switch the format around a little bit and do the shadow work journal prompts, right, to reflect the topic, to help people get more out of the topic that we're presenting today, which is self-betrayal. So I'm going to do that today. Again, if you're new here, in the last, 6 or 7 episodes, I think this is the 7th of my second season of this podcast. I provide shadow work journal prompts each episode, which is extremely useful in terms of creating and facilitating change for our lives, getting to the bottom of our patterns and our cycles and understanding them so that we can correct them, so that we can better fix them. And I think it's going to be very, very fitting to do that last. Let's work through this topic of self-betrayal, and then we can introduce some shadow work journal prompts. I'll get more into the shadow work journal prompts, as well as providing my normal disclaimers in terms of doing shadow work towards the end. So if you have been listening regularly, thank you for being here, of course. Appreciate it. But I think that's what we're going to do. We're probably going to do that from now on, actually. We'll do the shadow work journal prompts at the end after the main topic. So let's get into self-betrayal. Let's talk about what it is that we're talking about here. One of my ongoing themes is that in order to have good mental health, you have to have a good relationship with yourself. I mean, there's no way around that. There is no and, or, if, or buts about that. If you want good mental health, you got to have a good relationship with yourself. Your mental health is going to be limited to the extent of which your relationship with yourself is positive or negative. And unfortunately, these days, what I've noticed is that people have wicked, horribly bad, awful, toxic relationships with themselves. In most cases, people are their own worst enemy, but sadly, our culture, our society has taken I feel like a very, very wrong turn and pointing the fingers at other people that you're ruining my life, you're toxic, you're the problem in my life, right? A lot of victim mentality. The victim stance, the victim mentality is not identified as a mental disorder, but it should be, as I often say. And so as long as you are blaming these external factors for your life and your issues and your problems, you're going to miss the plot. You're going to lose the plot. You're going to fail to recognize that, hey, actually, my greatest adversary in my life is me, my own mind, my own emotions. I talk about this stuff all the time. It's just very, very strange that our own minds will turn on us. And it is our job to correct that because it can be corrected. If you notice that your mind has turned on you and you are your own worst critic, understand that that can be changed, that can be fixed. I am a walking, living, breathing testimony that it can be done. I used to be my own worst enemy, like big time, like not even by a little bit. And that is significantly, and I mean significantly, improved over the years. I try to pass on the things that I've learned about it. I feel like I went the long way around. I figured it out myself, so I'm trying to give the secrets so that people don't necessarily have to take the long way with this. And so when it comes to having a good relationship with ourselves, one of the things that is working against us is when we are in a state of self-betrayal, that we are betraying ourselves. Most people are completely unaware that this is happening. They're just absolutely completely unaware that they are betraying themselves. So why? Why do we do this? Why does this happen? I think for a number of reasons. The main one really is subconsciously we desire peace, we desire wellness, we desire to be whole, we desire happiness, and subconsciously we seek it. And we're just looking in the wrong places. We're trying the wrong things. And in so doing, we just self-betrayal is one of those maybe byproducts, one of those things that we just kind of inherently fall into because we have wrong ideas or wrong information about how to achieve that state of wholeness or happiness. Once upon a time, I'd started a series on happiness, and I got derailed with my podcast, health issues and all that. Happiness to me is a fascinating concept, and one that when you do a deep dive, I think it's interesting. I think the pursuit of happiness is a fascinating one, as well as extremely misunderstood. And you're not going to find it. You're not going to find wholeness and happiness, peace, or wellness as long as you're just broken into pieces. Again, something else I talk about all the time, being broken into pieces. Go listen to my Shattered Minds episode if you haven't already, because that's a huge basis of my core theory on what the source of mental illness is, mental health. But yeah, because our psyche kind of gets broken into pieces. We're not whole. We're not well. So at the core of wellness, happiness, wholeness is identity, is our sense of self, is the relationship that we have with ourself, is our self-esteem, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I was doing some writing about whether you find yourself or make yourself. I believe it's both. And I think you have to find yourself before you can make yourself, right? And you can't find yourself as long as you're in a state of self-betrayal. I've even heard, by the way, in some religions or some spiritual practices that the concept of sin is simply that, is self-betrayal, that you are betraying yourself. I'm not necessarily endorsing that idea. I just think it's interesting to think about, something to consider, you know? So one of the biggest ways that we betray ourselves is trying to be someone or something that we're not. Trying to be someone or something else. Usually that comes out of a misguided desire for people pleasing, that if other people will like us, then we will like ourselves. If we try and change ourselves or conform ourselves so that other people will like us, then we betray ourselves, right? You're not being true to yourself. You're trying to be true to them instead. You can't be true to them and you can't be true to yourself at the same time. And people pleasing is just one of those misguided things that a lot of people fall into, falsely sort of believing that it's going to have a good outcome, and it usually has extremely diminished returns. They're constantly moving backwards as long as they're engaging in a lot of people pleasing. I'd like to give an example from my own life, so kind of know what I'm talking about here. I'll try to keep it quick and concise. I was raised in a very religious household with a religion that's quite strict. And I live in Utah, so you can guess what religion that was. I'm not affiliated whatsoever with it any longer. But as long as I was in it, I was always in a state of self-betrayal. Like I was always trying to conform to the behaviors and the values and to do everything that I was told to do everything that I was, told I was supposed to live how I was told I was supposed to live, believe how I was supposed to believe. And as time went on, I hated it. I hated it. I hated my life. I hated myself. I hated everything about it. I was deeply, deeply, deeply miserable. And initially, I interpreted it as, well, there's something wrong with me, that I was broken, I was flawed, I was defective, that there was just something wrong with me, and I just needed to work harder at it, and I needed to do it more. Naturally, that made the situation worse. And my mental health got so bad during that phase of my life. So bad. Like, incredibly bad. When I finally went to therapy and I was finally like starting to live for myself and be more true to my values, the harder and harder it got, right, to stay in this religion. I quickly started to realize that at no point did my life in that church have anything to do with me and what I wanted and what was true to me. Every moment that I spent there was because of everybody else, was because I was trying to please other people. And I was deeply miserable because I was just in a state of deep self-betrayal. And in retrospect, I believe very firmly that that misery, like that ensuing misery, was a very, very important messenger, that it was screaming at me to, hey, be true to yourself. You're not living true to yourself, right? That deep, deep misery was, like, again, a very loud but a very important messenger, though I didn't know it at the time. I didn't have anybody to really guide me through it. And in retrospect, I realized that it was truly, truly impossible for me to build a strong sense of self or an identity as long as I was living in a state of betrayal, self-betrayal, that is. And so leaving that religion, and I mean, I still to this day can remember the exact moment and when I was sitting there thinking, like, why do I do this? I'm done. And I literally got up and walked out. And I never looked back. And that was a moment of probably the most important state of just being true to myself that I had exercised up until that point. And it was really only after that that I was able to really do some really, really good work on myself. It was only after that that I was able to really start finding myself and building myself up. And what I've learned about self-betrayal is that self-betrayal is usually attached to a group identity, meaning that we attach our identity to a group that we belong to, in my case, religion. And I didn't choose that for myself. It was chosen for me before I even had any idea what was what. I had no idea, right? Ever since you're a baby. But this is what we see a lot of this these days, because we're all seeking identity. We're all seeking this. We're all seeking a sense of self. And I'm a huge believer that you're not going to find it through a group identity. So it's like, I'm just gonna rapid fire some of these group identities. I'm not necessarily bashing these groups. Maybe I am, maybe I'm not, but I've let me provide a little bit of a disclaimer. I've never found a group attachment where people attach their identity to that group that I thought was healthy. So it's like, you're going to point out one, you're going to point out all of them. Okay. It could be a Democrat. It could be a Republican. It could be a vegan. It could be an atheist. It could be a religious person, someone who's religious. And so what happens is your values conform to the group. They're not necessarily your values. They're the values of the group. And unfortunately, what can often happen, because, I mean, I've seen it a lot, especially these days, I feel like, When the group's values shift, you're faced with a dilemma. You can either switch your values to keep up with the group and keep your status with the group or acceptance in that group, or you can stick to your own values and risk being rejected by that group. In that case, too, it's extremely jarring. It's very, very jarring to have suddenly your identity just get flushed down the toilet because that group changed their values, and you're like, wait, hang on. That's not what I believe in. That's not true to me. And sometimes that group can be like, excuse you? What did you just say? Get out. Frankly, I feel like we see that a lot these days. See it a lot. We see that a lot these days. And again, because people are seeking a sense of self, a sense of identity, it's easy for them to attach to a group. And again, when you attach to a group, it's suddenly the group's values are your values. That's it. No more, nothing else to see here. Here's your list. Here's a list of values. Here's a list of questions you can ask. Here's a list of sources that you can listen to. Here are the approved questions and the approved answers. And that's just comes with the territory with group identity. I am 100% convinced that as long as your identity is attached to a singular group identity, you're always going to be in a state of self-betrayal. Which is why it's like when I see people whose identity is attached to a certain group, those people just seem so profoundly miserable to me. The irony, of course, is that they're often presenting themselves as like, oh, we've got to figure it out. We're this wonderful group of people. And then you find some pretty nasty dynamics. I'm going to pick on the vegans a bit, and probably the atheists too, because I've just noticed that like there are some nasty vegans out there. Like they're nasty people. Like you break one little rule and they are, wow, vicious, right? Oh, you horrible person, you nasty person. The atheists to me are horribly, like they don't even see the irony that they act like a religion. They're very rigid about their rules of atheism and they're very dogmatic. And it's like, okay, now you're just religious about being non-religious. Because I went through a phase where I wasn't sure where I stood on my beliefs about God or spirituality, right? And I was quickly turned off by atheists because it felt like a religion. You put them in groups and they act like a religion. It's baffling to me that more people don't see it. Whatever. And maybe that's just my opinion. Again, I'm not saying there's anything fundamentally wrong with being vegan or being atheist, but when you're attaching your identity to a group, that's when things get precarious. So how do you know when you're betraying yourself? Truthfully, like your body, your psyche, your emotions, your nervous system, they'll all tell you. They'll all give you hints. All of those inputs that you have will give you, not just hints. For me, it was like, when I was living in a state of self-betrayal, it was like my nervous system, my soul, my emotions, my mind, my body were all screaming at me. It was impossible to ignore. Again, my mistake was thinking that, well, it's because I'm not doing a good enough job and I need to do this thing harder. And that's, I think, what a lot of people do when they betray themselves. They're like, okay, this isn't working because I'm not good enough, so I need to be better at the thing that I'm trying to do. And so they push themselves harder, and then they just kind of shove themselves deeper into a state of misery. Self-betrayal comes with like deep, intense feelings of like it's like your mind, your body, your emotions are just in a state of revolt. Usually in the form of like some deep, profound levels of misery. You're just going to feel miserable. The trick is learning to like take the time to pause and pay attention and listen to your body, listen to your nervous system, listen to all the things, and notice that your emotions are trying to send you messages. The trouble that we have with mental health, one of them, we have many troubles, but one of the troubles I find with people is they're too busy trying to get rid of the discomfort. They're trying to get rid of the uncomfortable feeling, get away from me, they're trying to chase it away. when those things often deliver extremely important messages. Like it's like they're trying to tell you something. They're trying to get you to listen. It's trying to send you a message. We're too busy labeling those feelings as something bad and as something that just needs to be, that we need to get rid of. The secret kind of lies in just being able to sit in a moment of trying to trust yourself while kind of questioning everything, which is really hard, right? Because, like, if your whole identity, like in my case, because it's true, when your whole identity is resting, like, in a religion, and in my case, this particular religion has a tendency to eclipse your whole identity. It tends to take your whole identity, that your whole identity rests in that institution. And then when suddenly it's gone, you just feel like the rug has been pulled out from under you. There's not a whole lot that scares people more than the feeling of not knowing who they are. Most people don't necessarily recognize it, but when even slightly confronted with the notion of having their identity disappear, they desperately cling on to what has given them an identity, even to the point that they may harm themselves or other people. I've seen this with parents, by the way, that, especially moms, frankly, that being a mom becomes their identity because they don't have a real identity. When their kids grow up and the kids need independence and autonomy, it's like she starts to feel like they don't need her anymore, and then there goes her identity. So they will often stifle their kids, smother them, which harms the kids. It can be psychological abuse, right? But they don't recognize that they're doing so because they're frantically trying to cling to their identity. And yet this type of identity it's not a real identity. It's almost like holding a spot. I almost kind of think of like the spot fillers, like at award shows or something. You just have someone sitting in a seat just to hold a spot for a VIP or something. Kind of like that, similar to that. So again, a lot of people will kind of cling to sort of a false identity or sort of a filler identity, so to speak, including, like, being in a group, because they're just frankly terrified of what is waiting for them if they don't have that identity. And the best thing to do, frankly, is to, like, directly confront that fear. Usually it's not as scary or as bad as you think it is. It's like when you're trying to avoid certain types of discomfort, that's when it makes that discomfort worse. It's like amplifies it, makes it way, way worse. I think a big part of my message, what I've learned about wellness and becoming well and improving your mental health, has a lot to do with, like, take things head on. Turn around and face it. Stop running from it. Stop avoiding it. Stop trying to chase it away. Stop numbing it. All the things, right? And believe me, I've been guilty of this too. I really have. I've been guilty of trying to numb things, or just, I mean, even to this day, when I talk to my mom, who I love dearly, she's always saying, "Oh, I'm sorry that you're going through some difficult emotions." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And I've repeated to her over and over and over again, I don't see this as a bad thing, but then it makes me think, like, this is the conditioning that I received as a child, to that bad feelings are bad and that you're supposed to feel good all the time. So in order to solve some of the identity crises, you have to take things head on. You kind of have to turn around and face your fear, which is what the shadow work journal prompts are for. This is a perfect segue. And now that I've kind of broken down the self-betrayal and how it harms our integrity and the people pleasing and how it pertains to our identity and all that stuff, this is a great time to introduce some hopefully very, very helpful and effective shadow work journal prompts. So I think these ones are going to really, really, really pull you open if you do them. It's going to help you do a real deep dive into your psyche and what makes you tick, Yeah, these ones are going to help you explore some of your identity and self-betrayal issues. Because again, we all do it. We're all guilty of it. Um, just, we tend to fall into bad habits, or we tend to fall into I don't know, ways of being that are not particularly good unless you've directly confronted it or taken it on. It's just going to exist. Does that make sense? Like, what I'm trying to say is that unless you have done emotional work, you're going to have emotional issues. Because once we get older, everybody requires some kind of emotional work. And so if a person has not done some kind of emotional work, they're going to have emotional issues. If you're not actively building your self-esteem, focusing on your self-esteem, it's not going to be very good. That's just the nature of it. So like working out, if you're not actively spending time being in good health, you're not going to be in good health. It just requires your attention. So mental health is that way a lot of the times. Okay, let's get into these journal prompts. Number one, what values have I adopted in my life because they are valuable to other people? In other words, what values do I hold that are not mine, but are values of others? So again, in my case, it's like, oh, I'm religious. I belong to this religion. Well, not because I chose it, because it was chosen for me. Number two, this is going to be an important one. Who am I afraid of upsetting or displeasing if I were to shift, change, or alter my values? Who am I afraid of upsetting if I were to make different choices for my life that better serve me? Because again, it's more than likely that that factor exists, right? And it just exists for most of us, okay? Very, very likely that factor exists. So the second part to number two would be this. Why am I more concerned about what they want for me instead of what I want for me? Number three, in what ways have I betrayed myself in the past? And did I learn from it? What did I learn from it? And how can those lessons help me now? Number four, in what ways do I currently betray myself? And yeah, that one can be tough. Make a list. Write down as many as you can think of. And finally, number five, this one can be challenging. The answer could be I don't know, and that's okay. But here it comes anyways. If the answer is I don't know to this one, you're going to want to sort of just put it on the back burner and sort of keep it on your mind as just a part of your life as you move forward, okay? So number five is what would my life look like if I were to live more true to myself and my own values? Okay, so that's going to do it for this episode. I hope you go do those journal prompts. I hope they're helpful to you. Time to wrap it up. Time for me to move on to the next thing. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to tell a friend, share it. Help me grow my audience. It would be very much appreciated. I'm so glad that you're here. I hope you found this beneficial. I'm sorry I don't have any better music to more effectively escort you out of my audio office here, my virtual office. Hope to see you again in the future. Hope you will listen in the future. And remember, you must do hard things. Take care.